Hello and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 5 of my Guitar Man portrait series, and in this video we're going to work some more on the facial features and work also on the hat. If you want to follow along with traditional mediums, check out part 1 in this series, where I have a list of all the paint and the canvas and the brushes that I use. The app that I'm going to be using is Corel Painter 2020 for Windows. And what we're going to do is start out working a little bit more on the face and try to get the facial features a little bit better and a little bit more refined. So here I'm just kind of blending in a little bit on the hair and around on the face, and I want to add a little bit of some skin color to the face, and you use oranges, and as I mentioned before, men's lips are going to be more faded and maybe a little bit darker than women's, so you would use sort of a alizarin crimson color mixed in with some gray. If you're following along traditionally, you can put some ultramarine blue in there, and that will kind of darken it a little bit. And then I'm just kind of smoothing out the edges of the mouth, and if you notice, his mouth is very thin. Women will have fuller lips, and so you don't want to give the men too full lips. You want to go ahead and just kind of make them thinner here, and so I'm just adding a little bit of some highlights above it with the light orange color, peach color, and a little bit of some reflected light, which you would add ultramarine blue with some white acrylic gesso. And then of course you have the little indentation under the bottom lip and the chin, and that just, you can add that with a darker brown or purple and smudge it in, and that shows the bottom lip there. Here I'm working a little bit more on his chin line, just trying to sort of refine the look of it, and you can use a burnt umber with white acrylic gesso if you're following along with your acrylic paints. And then I wanted to add a little bit of shadow next to his collar there. And purple is a natural shadow color, so I'm using a little bit of some purple there, and then just smoothing it in, we'll just add water. And if you're following along traditionally, you can use your number 6 round brush, and for smudging you can either use your finger or a paper towel. You want soft edges on his face, and so here I'm just adding a little bit more of the shadows and that's on his face there, with a little bit of some burnt sienna color, and just smoothing that in. Again, as I've said before, you don't want to leave hard lines. If you leave hard lines, that makes the person look older, so we want to smooth these out. And here I'm just kind of working on the collar again, and trying to get the shape of the collar. And then I wanted to work a little bit on the eyes, just add a little bit more of some highlight on the lower eyelid there, and you can use alizarin crimson with white acrylic gesso if you're following along traditionally, just a really light pink color. And then there I'm just kind of working on his ear, making it a little bit bigger, and adding a little bit of some darker tones to the bottom with some browns. You don't want to make the ear real big detailed. You just kind of want to give it a pretty good structure, but you don't want it more detailed than the face, because then people will be looking at his ear instead of the face, and you don't want that. You want people to be looking at his face, but you want to go ahead and just kind of give it a good basis and structure there, and make it look correct. So I'm just kind of adding a little bit of some shadows on it, and putting the hair around it. He's got some light colored hair around there, so you would add some grayish color for the hair there. You can use burnt sienna with ultramarine blue and white acrylic gesso. That'll make a nice gray color if you're following along with your acrylics. And in here I wanted to go ahead and try to just adjust a little bit on the collar and the edge of his jawline there. If you want to do that, if you think you've got the face a little bit too big or too wide, just try to match the background color as best you can. If you're following along traditionally, it's harder. It's easy digitally. But anyway, just match that and make it a little bit smaller. Make that color go around his jaw. And here I'm working on the hat. I want to go ahead and start working on the shape of the hat. So I'm just kind of working on the brim here, trying to get a good shape here, and working on the crown of it. And you can use a black color for this. You can use, if you're following along traditionally, you can either use a black color, or you can put in some ultramarine blue in it to make it not so flat looking. Or you can use ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and purple. That will actually give you a black color if you don't have any black. And so I'm just kind of working on the shape of the crown and trying to get the brim and the bend of it right there. And I'm using a little bit of the background color to cut down on the brim a little bit and just kind of reshape it. And ideally you would get it right the first time, but that never happens with me. I always have to go back and fix things. So that's kind of how you fix it, is just use some of that background color. And it may look different, so if it looks different, a little trick is to spread all that color around on the other side. If you get a different blue color, just spread it around on the other side and throughout your painting, and that gives it color continuity and looks like you didn't make a mistake. And then I want to go ahead and add the highlight on the brim, so you use kind of a light gray color for that, and you just have your black mixture and throw in some more white, and just try to go ahead and add that on the edge of the brim, and then kind of smudge it in. I'm using the Detail Opaque for the highlights on this hat, and I'm looking at the photo that's overexposed so that I can see all the creases and the hollows and where the shadows are of the hat. And then you just go ahead and smudge that in. You want to make sure that you soften it. You don't want to leave those lines. You want to make sure that it looks like a felt hat. So you're trying to keep the same texture that the hat is. And then I'm just kind of adding a little bit more of the highlight on the front and on the top of the crown, and leaving the dark where the indentations are on the crown. And you just go ahead and keep doing that and smudging it in till you kind of get the shape that you want. And I like to use grainy water sometimes in Corel Painter because that gives it a little bit more of a textured look. And so you can use that instead of just add water, because then that gives it kind of a little bit more of a look of a wool hat or felt or whatever material it may happen to be made out of. And so here I'm just adding a little bit more of the highlight according to what I can see with the overexposed photo. And you can add a little bit of some light blue too if you want to make that your highlight color, because it's kind of a reflected highlight also. And that just kind of gives it a little bit of some variation. Sometimes the gray is more monotone looking, so if you want to add a little bit more color, you can use a sort of a bluish gray. There's all different kinds of grays. There's warm grays that have a little bit of orange and red in them, And there's the cooler grays that have purples and blues in them. So if you want to just go ahead and kind of give it that reflected highlight look, you can do that. And here I'm working on the hat band that goes around there, and make sure that you curve it up so towards the top so that it looks like it's not flat, and it gives it a look of 3 dimensions. And then I'm putting on the designs. It's a leather hat band, and it looks like it has some painted designs on it, so I'm sort of adding those there on that. And at first I added some black on there, but the designs look like they're blue, so I eventually went back over that and added more of a blue color to them. And then I'm adding a little bit more white to his eyebrows, his hair, just kind of trying to get that look of the way his eyebrows do, and adding a little bit more of a shaping the eyebrows kind of. You have to look and see how the eyebrows are made. And then here I'm just working more on that design, trying to get a little bit of the white color on there. And I'm using opaque acrylic. If you're following along traditionally, you would probably use your short script brush or just something that kind of can do detail work. Now we're not doing real little details, so you don't have to get out a real small brush, but a number 3 round might be pretty good to use, or just like I said, your short script brush. And then I'm adding a little bit of highlight to the edge of the leather hat band there. And here just kind of refining the look of the design, trying to get those even, and a little bit of a pattern going on there. And I'm using a kind of a burnt sienna color with maybe yellow ochre if you're following along traditionally for the leather part of the hat band. And then the little silver concho type thing on there, I'm using a little bit of gray and smudging it out. You don't want it completely outlined. I'm just trying to show the edges of it and sort of adding a little bit of some highlight with a white color. It won't be pure white. It'll be kind of a light gray there. And just kind of smudging that out. And you want to make sure that you kind of make sure the edges are not real hard. Although it's a metal object, it's kind of shadowed, so you want to go ahead and leave that look there. So this is the end of part 5 of my Guitar Man series. And in part 6, we're going to go ahead and add the glasses and start working a little bit more on the vest and more on his clothes. So if you want to see that, hit the subscribe button. And thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.